My name is Amanda. I'm 32 years old, and for 6 years I was trapped by a narcissist who controlled every part of my life. This is my narcissist true story, and even now, telling it feels like opening a wound that never healed. People see bruises and call it abuse, but they never talk about the kind of wounds that leave no mark on the skin. For 6 years, I lived inside an invisible prison built out of words, silence, manipulation, and control. At first, it didn't look like abuse. It looked like love, or at least I thought it did. He wanted to be with me all the time. He told me I was special, that no one had ever understood him the way I did. I thought I had found something real, but slowly, that devotion became suffocating. That closeness became a cage. What I thought was love was actually toxic love, a toxic relationship where my freedom vanished piece by piece. The first signs of narcissist control were so subtle that I doubted myself. If I laughed too loudly, he would say, "Do you have to make a scene everywhere we go?" If I was quiet, he'd snap, "You're cold and boring." If I cried, he would roll his eyes and mutter, "You're too sensitive. Stop being dramatic." No version of me was acceptable. No reaction was ever right. And little by little, I stopped reacting at all. That is how emotional abuse works. It doesn't scream at you from the start. It whispers until you question your own voice. Silence became his sharpest weapon. If I said something he didn't like, he would punish me by disappearing into silence for days. He wouldn't answer my questions, wouldn't look at me, wouldn't acknowledge that I existed. I begged for scraps of attention, and the more I begged, the colder he became. I apologized for things I hadn't done, just to break that wall of silence. Imagine begging for words, even cruel ones, just to feel human again. That was my daily reality, my private emotional abuse story. One night I made his favorite dinner, hoping it would make things better. He ate without a word, and when I asked if he liked it, he put his fork down, stared at me and said, "Why do you always need validation? It's pathetic." My face burned with shame. Later, I cried in the bathroom with the shower running so he wouldn't hear. And yet, I convinced myself that I was the problem. That maybe I really was pathetic. Maybe I was needy. Maybe I didn't deserve more. That's the poison of narcissist manipulation. It teaches you to turn the knife against yourself. Over time, he began to control more of me. If I wanted to see friends, he'd say, "They don't really care about you, Amanda. They laugh at you behind your back." If I wanted to visit my parents, he'd sigh, "Why waste time with people who never understood you? Stay here with me. I'm all you need." Slowly, I stopped seeing people. I stopped answering calls. Invitations disappeared. My world shrank until he was the only person left in it. That is narcissist isolation, when your world becomes so small that the abuser is the only thing inside it. I told myself it was love. I told myself he wanted me close because I was special. I thought maybe this was how real love worked. Total devotion, total loyalty. But deep down, I knew it wasn't devotion. It was control, pure narcissist control. And by the time I realized it, it was already too late. This is just the beginning of my narcissist confession, but already you can see the pattern, the subtle criticisms, the silences, the twisting of words, the shrinking of my world. It wasn't one big blow, it was a steady drip of poison, and by the time I tasted how bitter it was, I had already swallowed enough to forget who I was. The deeper I fell into this narcissist relationship, the less I trusted myself. Gaslighting became his favorite weapon. He twisted reality so skillfully that I began to wonder if I was losing my mind. I'd catch him in a contradiction, and he would smirk and say, "You always hear what you want to hear, Amanda. You make up stories in your head." His words were so confident, so certain, that my own memory felt fragile. That's how a gaslighting story begins. Not with obvious lies, but with small distortions that make you betray your own senses. One evening I found lipstick smudged on his shirt. It wasn't mine. My stomach dropped, but when I asked about it, he didn't flinch. He laughed. "You're paranoid again. That's from you. Don't you remember leaning on me earlier?" My certainty crumbled. I began to think maybe I had misremembered. Maybe I was imagining it. That is narcissist manipulation, to lie so smoothly that the victim starts doubting their own eyes. There were countless nights when he disappeared without explanation. I'd call, worried, and he would answer coldly, "Stop acting like my mother. I was working. Do you want me to stop providing for you?" The guilt hit me instantly. Instead of demanding honesty, I apologized. I said sorry for caring. Other times he'd tell me he was going to see a friend, and later, when I asked how it went, he'd deny ever saying it. "You invent things, Amanda. You really need help." My mind spun in circles. I no longer knew what was true, what was real. This wasn't just a toxic relationship. It was a war on my reality. The more confused I became, the more power he gained. He once whispered to me, "You're unstable. No one would believe you. Everyone sees how crazy you are." That sentence became a curse in my head. I started to believe I was broken, irrational, hysterical. That's the cruelest part of psychological abuse, when the victim accepts the abuser's voice as truth. The manipulation went beyond lies. He played games with affection too. Sometimes, after days of silence, he would suddenly become loving. He'd kiss me, hold me, whisper, "You know you're my everything, right? I can't live without you." For a brief moment, I felt hope. But hours later, the same man would spit words like knives. "You're worthless. You'd be nothing without me." That cycle, idealization, devaluation, discard, kept me chained. It was narcissist control disguised as love, and it made me addicted to crumbs of affection. One of the cruelest humiliations happened at a party. I wore a dress I loved, something that made me feel like myself again. At first, everything seemed fine, but then, in front of his friends, he leaned close and whispered, "You look cheap in that dress." Everyone's staring for the wrong reasons. My heart dropped. I froze, trying not to cry. Later, in the car, he told me, "You embarrassed me tonight. If you keep acting like this, I'll stop taking you anywhere." That is how narcissist abuse hides. It wears a smile in public and a mask of charm, while in private, it tears you apart. Every holiday, every celebration, became a stage for cruelty. On Christmas, he gave me a gift, then mocked my reaction. "Look at you, overreacting again. You're ridiculous." On my birthday, instead of celebrating, he said, "Don't forget who keeps a roof over your head. Without me, you're nothing." Those moments branded my heart. I wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that I deserved love too. But the voice in my head told me to stay quiet, because silence was safer, because resistance always ended in punishment. I stayed. I stayed because he convinced me no one else would want me. "You should be grateful I even put up with you," he said often. And I believed him. I stayed because I thought maybe I could fix it. Maybe I could prove my love enough times to earn his. I stayed because I was afraid of the world outside, a world he painted as hostile, full of people who would laugh at me, betray me, abandon me. That's how narcissist isolation works. Not just cutting you off from others, but making you fear what's outside the cage. Looking back now, I see it clearly. This wasn't love. It was toxic love, the kind that poisons slowly but deeply. It was an emotional abuse story, written day by day in lies, silence, humiliation, and fear. At the time, though, all I could see was survival. All I thought was, if I just stay quiet, if I just do what he wants, maybe tomorrow will be better. But tomorrow never was. The longer I stayed in this toxic relationship, the more I disappeared. My world revolved around his moods, his rules, his punishments. I no longer asked myself what I wanted, only what would keep him calm. That's how narcissist control takes over. Not with one big act of violence, but with 1,000 small cuts that bleed you dry. Public humiliation became common. At dinners, if I spoke too much, he'd interrupt me with a joke at my expense. "Don't listen to Amanda. She always exaggerates." People laughed politely, but inside I shrank. Later, when I told him it hurt, he smirked. "If you didn't want to be embarrassed, you should have kept quiet." That was his favorite line. Keep quiet. Silence was the role he assigned me, and I learned to play it, because speaking always carried consequences. He began controlling even the smallest choices. If I wanted to try a new hairstyle, he'd say, "You're not the type of woman who can pull that off." If I gained weight, he'd mock, "Careful, Amanda, you're starting to look lazy." If I lost weight, he'd accuse, "Who are you trying to impress?" My body no longer belonged to me. It belonged to his criticisms. Even intimacy was twisted into a weapon. If I said no, he accused me, "You must be cheating. Who else are you giving yourself to?" If I obeyed, I felt like an object, used and discarded. That's psychological abuse, when even your own body feels like a prison. The gaslighting continued too. Once I found messages on his phone that clearly showed flirtation. When I confronted him, he laughed. "You're imagining things again. You twist everything into betrayal." He made me feel ashamed for even asking. That's the heart of narcissist manipulation, making the victim apologize for discovering the truth. I remember one of the worst nights, our anniversary. I had planned a small celebration, cooked dinner, lit candles, wore something special. He arrived late, glanced at the table and said, "You don't deserve to celebrate. You're nothing without me." Then he went to the bedroom, leaving me sitting alone in front of untouched food and melting candles. That night I realized I wasn't just unloved. I was erased. That's the cruelty of narcissist abuse. It convinces you to grieve your own life while you're still living it. By then, the narcissist isolation was complete. I no longer saw friends or family. I lied to them, telling them I was fine, because I couldn't bear the shame of the truth, and because he convinced me they wouldn't understand. "They don't care about you," he'd whisper. "I'm the only one who puts up with you." Over time, I believed it. I cut myself off before they could. I locked my own cage and handed him the key. That's how far the manipulation had gone. I was policing myself, protecting him, even as he destroyed me. Physically, my body carried the evidence of this invisible prison. Headaches, panic attacks, sleepless nights, a constant weight on my chest. When I suggested seeing a doctor, he scoffed. "There's nothing wrong with you, Amanda. You just like playing the victim." I believed him. I thought maybe I was too dramatic, too weak, but those symptoms were the marks of living with a narcissist, the scars of emotional abuse no one else could see. There were moments when I fantasized about leaving. I imagined packing a bag, walking out the door, never looking back. But the fantasy always collapsed under fear. His words echoed louder than my own thoughts. "You'll never survive without me. You're worthless. No one else will love you." And I believed it. That's the cruel genius of narcissist control. You stay not because the door is locked, but because you believe you don't deserve to walk through it. Looking back, I see that what I lived was not love. It was toxic love, a prison disguised as devotion. It was a carefully built web of manipulation, humiliation, gaslighting, and isolation. But at the time, it felt like the only reality I had. I stayed because I thought maybe one day he would love me the way I loved him. That hope was the chain that held me down, and the longer I stayed, the weaker I became, until I almost forgot that freedom was even possible. The longer I stayed, the smaller I became. My life no longer belonged to me. It was measured by his moods, his silence, his insults. Every morning I woke up with the same thought. What version of him will I face today? That constant uncertainty was its own kind of torture. Living with a narcissist isn't just about surviving the bad days. It's about never being allowed a good one. I stopped dreaming. I stopped planning. I stopped existing outside of him. If I laughed, he'd accuse me of hiding something. If I cried, he'd say, "You're weak, Amanda. No wonder no one else wants you." If I showed anger, he'd sneer, "There it is, your crazy side again." Every emotion was twisted into proof that I was broken. That is narcissist abuse, taking your humanity and turning it into evidence against you. My reflection in the mirror became unrecognizable. I looked into my own eyes and saw nothing but emptiness. The girl who once loved books, who dreamed of traveling, who laughed too loudly at stupid jokes, she was gone. All that remained was a shell. That's what a toxic relationship does. It kills you while you're still breathing. There were moments when I thought about leaving, truly leaving. I would stand by the door with my keys in my hand, but fear always pulled me back. Fear and shame, and that echo of his voice inside me. "You're worthless. You'll never survive without me. You're trapped by a narcissist, and you're lucky I even tolerate you." Those words were chains tighter than steel. That was my invisible prison. The isolation was complete. I didn't call my family anymore. I didn't answer messages from old friends. I lied to everyone who asked how I was doing. I wore a mask, pretending things were fine, because admitting the truth felt impossible. He had convinced me no one would believe me. And in my darkest moments, I wondered if he was right. Who would believe that behind his charming smile lived a man who destroyed me piece by piece? That is the cruelty of a gaslighting story, when the victim doubts not just their memory, but their own worthiness of being heard. Even my body carried the evidence. Sleepless nights, trembling hands, constant panic. I thought I was sick, but the sickness was living with him. The sickness was the narcissist manipulation, control, and humiliation I endured daily. He made me believe it was all in my head, but it was written in my body like scars no one else could see. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It wasn't one huge fight or one final betrayal. It was an ordinary night. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, ignoring me completely. I sat across from him, staring at the walls, feeling like a ghost in my own home. And suddenly, I thought, this is it. This is my life if I stay. 10 more years, 20 more years, a lifetime of silence and emptiness. It wasn't fear that hit me. It was grief. Grief for myself. Grief for the 6 years I had lost. Grief for the Amanda who once existed before the abuse. I don't have a happy ending to share. I didn't run out the next morning, suitcase in hand, victorious. Life doesn't work like that. What I have is this confession. This is my narcissist confession. My way of reclaiming a voice I thought I had lost forever. These words are mine. This pain is mine. And speaking it out loud is the first step towards something I'm not even sure I can name yet. Freedom, maybe, or just survival. He only loved me when I was broken. He only stayed because he could control me. That was never love. It was toxic love, the kind that poisons slowly until you forget what healthy love even looks like. And maybe I'm still poisoned. Maybe I'll carry his words in my head forever. But I know this. I don't want to stay in that prison anymore. This is my emotional abuse story, my gaslighting story, my narcissist true story. It is filled with lies, manipulation, humiliation, and silence. But it is also proof that even in the darkest cage, there can still be a whisper of hope. He trapped me with his control. He tried to erase me, but I am still here. And maybe that's the beginning of my freedom. Even after leaving pieces of myself behind, the memories linger. Sometimes they come back as whispers, sometimes as screams. It doesn't matter how much time has passed. I still carry his voice inside me, repeating the same phrases that once kept me chained. That is the cruel aftermath of narcissist abuse. Even when the abuser isn't in the room, he still controls you through echoes of the past. I remember a night when I tried to talk about my dreams. I told him that one day I wanted to write a book about survival, about women finding their strength after pain. He laughed, not kindly, but with cruelty dripping from every syllable. Who would read anything you write, Amanda? You can't even tell a story without crying. No one cares about your words. That cut deeper than silence. That's what narcissist manipulation does. It makes you abandon your own dreams before you even begin. There were also times when he turned my fears against me. I once admitted that I was terrified of ending up alone. He stored that confession like a weapon. Later, in an argument, he spat. You'll end up alone no matter what. You're unlovable. You should thank me every day for staying. That's the essence of psychological abuse, twisting your deepest vulnerabilities into shackles. Even the way he controlled money was a prison. I wasn't allowed to have my own account. He gave me just enough for groceries and bills, never more. If I asked for a little extra, he'd sneer, "Why do you need money, Amanda? Planning to run away? Who would even take you?" Once, I secretly saved small amounts, coins and bills hidden in an envelope. He found it. He tore the money to pieces in front of me, letting the scraps fall like ashes. "Don't bother," he said. "You'll never survive without me." That moment wasn't just financial control. It was the destruction of hope itself. This wasn't love. It was a toxic relationship, designed to make me smaller every day, to make me doubt, apologize, obey. It was toxic love, a love that demanded silence and offered humiliation in return. That is what it means to be trapped by a narcissist. Your world shrinks to his shadow, and even your thoughts feel dangerous. The isolation was suffocating. Friends stopped calling. Family gatherings became excuses I couldn't attend. "Why would you want to see them?" he'd ask. "They don't understand you like I do." At first, I resisted, but over time, shame silenced me. I didn't want anyone to see how broken I had become, so I stopped showing up. That is narcissist isolation. Not only being cut off, but cutting yourself off because the shame is too heavy. There were moments of confusion when he'd show sudden kindness. Out of nowhere, he'd bring me flowers or whisper that he loved me. For a fleeting second, I felt hope. But the kindness always disappeared, replaced by coldness or cruelty. It was never love. It was another form of manipulation, keeping me tethered to him with crumbs of affection. That cycle, the endless hope and disappointment, is the hallmark of a gaslighting story. I sometimes wonder if anyone else saw it. Did his friends notice the way I shrank when he spoke? Did strangers catch the flicker of fear in my eyes? Or was his mask so perfect that no one suspected? That's the danger of a narcissist relationship. To the outside world, he looks charming, even admirable. But behind closed doors, he becomes the prison guard of your life. Even my handwriting changed. I looked at old journals once and saw how my words had become shaky, faint, almost afraid of existing on the page. That's what emotional abuse does. It doesn't just silence your voice. It seeps into your body, into your pen, into every expression of yourself. This is my narcissist confession. For 6 years, I lived with fear disguised as love, with silence disguised as peace, with control disguised as devotion. I stayed because I believed the lies. I stayed because I was ashamed. I stayed because he convinced me that no one else would ever love me. But here I am, speaking it out loud. And maybe that means I am no longer entirely his prisoner. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable. Not the silence in the room, but the silence inside yourself. That's how it felt in the last months of my narcissist relationship. I wasn't just quiet on the outside. I was gone on the inside. I no longer argued. I no longer cried where he could see. I no longer asked for love. I moved like a ghost, existing only to avoid his rage, his silence, his humiliation. That is the reality of narcissist control. It doesn't just chain your body, it erases your soul. I often looked at my reflection and wondered if anyone would recognize me. My eyes looked hollow. My smile was gone. I wasn't Amanda anymore. I was just an extension of him. A prisoner. A shadow. A warning. Living with a narcissist is like living in a house with no windows. You forget what light feels like. Why did I stay? Because he made me believe I had no choice. He filled my head with fear, with shame, with poison. You'll never survive without me. You're worthless. No one else will want you. Those weren't just insults. They became my truth. That was my invisible prison, built from his words and my silence. That is the essence of emotional abuse. Convincing the victim to hold the keys to their own cage, but never dare to use them. Even now, I sometimes wake up at night hearing his voice. I hear him telling me I'm nothing. I hear him mocking my tears. I hear him laughing when I begged for kindness. That's the trauma of a gaslighting story. The lies stay long after the liar is gone. They echo inside you, making you doubt even your own healing. This is my narcissist confession. I didn't leave because I was brave. I didn't escape in a dramatic moment of triumph. I stayed far longer than I should have. And even when I finally walked away, I carried the cage with me. Freedom doesn't erase the scars. Freedom doesn't erase the whispers. But freedom does give you a voice. And this is mine. This is my narcissist true story. My emotional abuse story. My testimony of toxic love and toxic relationships that break more than bones. They break identities. They break souls. I don't tell it for pity. I don't tell it for revenge. I tell it because silence almost destroyed me, and speaking feels like survival. He only loved me when I was broken. He only wanted me when I was quiet. He only stayed because he could control me. That was never love. It was narcissist abuse, a cycle of manipulation, isolation, lies, and humiliation. And yet, here I am. I am still breathing. I am still speaking. I am still writing these words. That means he didn't erase me completely. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if the scars will ever fade. But I know this. I don't want to live as a prisoner anymore. I don't want to keep calling chains love. I don't want to keep mistaking cruelty for devotion. He trapped me with his control, but he doesn't get to keep me there forever. And maybe, just maybe, that's the beginning of my freedom.